Hey, Sam here. How I eliminated distractions for good. These are the exact steps explained. So, why eliminate them first of all? Well, that's a good question if you're asking it. Because distractions are killing your energy. It's going to leave you feeling drained, stressed, wired, and tired. Now, one of the big things around distractions is they've become a normal part of life. Back even just, 100, 150 years ago, there was no distractions. I mean, of course there was, but in comparison to what we have now, there was very little, right? Technology has advanced, which I think is an incredible thing. However, it's led to us more distracted than ever before. It's killing your focus, leaving you feeling like you haven't done enough at the end of the day, so you never fully switch off from work or business. You maybe have constant thoughts of, what you haven't got done. At night time, when your wife's trying to speak to you or when your kids are trying to interact with you, there's this constant guilt around, I should be doing work, or when you're doing work, I should be with my kids. It's killing your mental bandwidth because ultimately, like, we only have a certain capacity. And when you think about Wi-Fi bandwidth, right, if you're streaming a ton of different things and you don't have good Wi-Fi, the bandwidth, you're just filling up that bandwidth, and eventually, like, it's too full, and you're not going to be able to stream as well, or whatever happens in that scenario. But basically, it just means that actually it's too full, right? There's no more capacity left for it. And so this is like when your wife tries to talk to you at the end of the day, but you're not really listening, or you just you just feel like there's real life stuff to kind of handle, like the house or things like that, and you just kind of switch off from it because you genuinely don't have the mental bandwidth anymore, and it kills your presence. So it means you're distracted around your kids, you're distracted around your family, you're just distracted in real life and you're not there fully present. You've become a human doing and not a human being. It's easier to be distracted. Let's be honest, it's easier to jump on our phones and scroll when things are a little bit hard or there's a conversation that you don't want. So what's the opposite? Well, it's the high performing dad. The dad who is ambitious and driven, okay? This is what the high performing dad is. It's a dad who wants success at work and go after his dreams and goals in life, at work, in business, whatever that is, but doesn't want to sacrifice his family or health in the process. He wants to earn more money, he wants to climb the ladder, or he wants to build a business that has massive impact and ultimately, has more impact, more money, and all of that sort of thing. And he eliminates all distractions, right? Because he doesn't want to sacrifice his family and his health and his relationships in the process. He eliminates all those distractions and only does his highest priorities, leaving him with 10 plus hours back in his week for the things that he loves, the things that he enjoys, time with family, maybe more work, but probably not, hobbies, fun, mates, experiences. And it gives him more focus, more energy, and more presence. And so where was I? Like, why listen to me, I guess, in a way? And I want to explain that I was the complete opposite to what I am now in many, many different aspects. In my weight, I was overweight. I didn't know how to get out of that, and I managed to get into shape and, stay there. That's not the topic of this video, though. The big thing here is that I was always distracted as well, and it was either through binge watching TV, 6+ hours on my phone a day, scrolling through social media, looking back at messages, and all that sort of stuff. I would set up to do deep work. Once I got a business, I'd set up to do deep work, and then have an idea. So I'd go on my phone to look at it, but then I got distracted by a notification or social media, and I ended up in the doom scroll, and I was like, oh man, like 10 minutes later, 15, whatever it was. And I was like, I can't even remember what I went on my phone for in the first place. And then you put your phone down, you're like, oh yeah, I remember now. And you go back on and the cycle starts again. I would have afternoon slumps of just feeling so tired after lunch that physically, I was at home. Sometimes I would have to lie down. Sometimes I would just push through and get up and go, or have another coffee or whatever it was. I never was able to fully switch off from work because my own business. Like, I wanted to grow it, I wanted to get better, and because that at the time, it was happening very slowly, or not at the pace that I'd like. I was constantly thinking about work. I was worried, I was in fear, and that meant that my relationship suffered. I just wasn't a good husband, being honest. Like, I mean, I was all right at times, but most of the time, day to day, I couldn't help with buying a house because I was too involved and I had no mental bandwidth left, because obviously it was COVID at that time as well. And for business, like, it was huge. I had no mental bandwidth to help my wife with mortgage stuff and all that, getting married, she did all that and all that sort of stuff, and yeah, it wasn't a good place for me to be. Like, I wasn't present for my family either. If I went to see them, I would be on my phone, or I would just, like, the conversation, one word answers and that sort of stuff. I didn't have the energy. I was drained, and the mental bandwidth just wasn't there, to be able to do any of this. I constantly wanted to be in a different place in life. Like, I constantly wanted to be more. Like, I wasn't grateful for what I had. I just wanted more and more and more. I wasn't grateful for what I had. I was consumed by thoughts of business, consumed by fear, consumed by scarcity, and ultimately, a lot of that was just distraction based, because I was trying to escape my current reality. And I had zero energy, despite at this point being healthy, despite training 4 or 5 times a week, drinking plenty of water, eating healthy, getting good quality sleep. I never felt like I woke up feeling good. I always had a great evening routine. I had these different morning routines and never felt good. Some people don't even have these things, and so they're really a good implementation to start with. But ultimately, like, I just didn't feel like I had energy. I was constantly drained, and being honest, it was a horrible place to be. I ended up on a walk with my wife at one point, and just said, "Look, I feel lost in life. I feel like my purpose is gone." Right, and so that's where it led to be. And something as innocent as going on your phone feels innocent. It feels like it's just the normal now, right? It's the normal of what everyone does. Where, I don't live in London, but when you go in the tube, everyone is on their phones. I try and stay off mine now, playing games or looking at the news, or messaging or whatever, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. We're constantly distracted, and it could even be junk food, it could even be alcohol, it could even be TV, as I said before. It could be other things in life. But I would say phone is probably one of the major ones now. And it just led me to ultimately, like, I knew that if I continued on this path, that it would go the same way as my other relationships, but this time I was married. I would end up divorced, and with marriage there's a bit more commitment, so it would take a lot longer than my previous relationships for it to get there, but it would get there, because, like, why would my wife stay with me? Now I've got a kid. Like, if I was distracted, I know that ultimately, like, I wouldn't have as close a relationship with them as I wanted. They'd want my attention, I wouldn't be there, and ultimately they'd stop trying to get it. Like, that's just the fact of life. Ultimately, our kids look up to us as role models. Like, I want to be the role model to my kid, that, if I'm honest, I don't think I personally had myself. And I ultimately know that if I continue, my business isn't going to grow, because I'm distracted. I'm not getting good work done. I always feel like I need to do more at the end of the day. And so my goal this year is to triple my income for my business without sacrificing my family, my relationships, or my health. And I know I can do this because the first step is eliminating distractions. And the other steps are in a different video. If you want to go check it out, I give a big detailed breakdown. I think it's called Project Titan 25. That's what I've named it for this year. And you can go check that out. But, stay here, because I'm going to show you the exact steps on how to eliminate distractions. But the first step is to eliminate distractions. And I've got a bonus one at the end, which is crazy, and you're going to want to listen to it. because really I think it's the most essential one. So, how I eliminate distractions, the exact steps. First of all, I did an attention audit. And by the way, this is the system that I take my clients through. It's called the dopamine reset system. This is part of it. I couldn't give a massive detailed breakdown in this video just because it would probably go on for hours. But you can grab it for free. I'll tell you how at the end. But the attention audit, where was my energy leaking and being drained? This is what I first did. I audited my whole entire lifestyle, what I was doing, and where my energy was leaking. Where's my energy being drained? What tasks am I doing and where is my energy being drained? So really that's the big first step. Do an attention audit. Just figure out what the hell you're doing every day, right? And that's where I figured out where my energy leaking was, and that's how I managed to fix it, right? Because we have, just like in business or work, we have a problem, we have a constraint, and we look to fix that. It's like a blocked pipe, or a kink in the hose. As soon as you unravel it, the water starts coming back out. So number 2 was the control room. So basically, the control room is what I call the overall second phase of the dopamine reset system, and that is your environment. And so I realized that my environment was not set up for focus. It was actually set up and wired for distractions. There was so many different things that I had to change with this. And so that started with technology, my phone and laptops, okay? I upgraded those. So I went about changing them, upgrading them, and looking at the best ways to really set them all up so I could focus and have that, real, as soon as I sat down on my laptop, because I do need my phone sometimes, to set up and make sure that I was set up for deep work, right? And so that became a huge part of my environment. I also set up my office space to allow for getting in the zone, right? You have to, it's not just going to happen, right? I think so often in life we think everything is we're just hoping that things are going to happen. We hope that we have more energy when we wake up. We are hoping that we have more confidence, or we hope that we will be able to get in shape. But ultimately we know that it takes action, right? We can't be energized without taking the actions to get there in the first place. So that was another big one for me. And so setting all those up correctly helped me wire myself for focus and discipline. Helped me, in the end, it's like when you're trying to lose a bit of weight and you've got a ton of snacks. People always say kids are their excuse. Oh, but the kids need this and that. Anyway, that's a different story. When you've got those snacks in there, right, the chances of you eating them are far, far higher. If you got that snack cupboard, chucked it all in the bin, and didn't have any in the house, you can't snack on those things. You'd have to physically go out and get them, either walk to the shop or get in the car and drive to the supermarket, right? So you're far, far, far less likely to then snack on junk food when it's not in the house. Okay? Now, of course, we've got delivery and all that sort of stuff nowadays, and you can get things delivered to the door. But the sentiment still stands, because ultimately, most of us probably don't do that. So get rid of the distractions from the environment you're in. Number 3, the system stack. This is huge, but not as big as the last one. Stay tuned for the last one. The system stack. I systemized everything so that discipline became automatic. Okay? Design beats discipline. So that comes from number 1, environment, and number 2, setting up systems. And what is a system? Well, for me, a system is a structure or something that you implement as a rhythm inside of your life that helps you with more energy, more focus, more presence to live as the man that you want to be. Okay? And ultimately, if you thought of a high performance person, right? Let's say that could be anyone from an athlete to potentially uh, a business owner that earns a lot of money, but is actually high performance and not just slogging it out. You can imagine what their life is like. Do you think that they, sit on an evening and watch Netflix every day? Probably not, right? That's just fact. Do they sit and eat junk food all the time? Do they, I don't know, um, indulge in their phone? Are they constantly distracted by the messages and the notifications? Are they scrolling through social media, or are they creating? In 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 this kind of creation world, there's a saying that's like, con- create, don't consume. I nearly said it the wrong way around there. Create more than you consume, right? Because ultimately, if we're creating more than we consume, we're gonna grow and we're gonna advance. So it's setting up these automatic kind of things. And when you think about a habit, right? It's like going to brush your teeth. You don't actually think about how you're brushing your teeth anymore. You just go and do it. Same as tying a shoelace. At one point, you had to learn that. You had to implement it. But now it's just not a thought. And this is exactly what the system stack is about, right? It's about making these automatic. So number one is to set up a morning and evening rhythm. And that is what I did. Like I said, I had already had those, but ultimately they were other people's. They were someone else's. You've seen the gurus getting up at 4 a.m. doing ice baths and all that sort of stuff. And there is reasons for it, but ultimately for the high performing dad, there's also real life in there. I think half of these influencers and stuff, that it's unrealistic, right? That it's not actually looking at real and normal life. As much as I'd love to be like, yes, this is it, could you do it? Sure. But ultimately, there's going to be days where life gets in the way, and it's not needed. You do not need to get up at 4 a.m. to become a high performing dad. You do not need to get up at 5 a.m. You can get up whenever you want, and ultimately, it's about you. You do have to get up, right? And you do have to get up before kids probably, and sort yourself out first. That's a fact, right? I'm not going to beat around the bush about that, but it doesn't have to be 4 a.m., it doesn't have to be 5 a.m. And the routines don't have to last 2 hours. It doesn't have to be an endless amount of slog, because that's where I was going wrong as well. And so I realized that actually, like, none of this is working for me, so why don't I make it work for me? And so I set up my morning and evening rhythms that energize me. And now, they're shorter than they were before. It used to probably take an hour and a half. It now, it is a bit longer, but that's because of the season of life I am in, and because I'm normally up at 5 at the minute. It was 4 a.m. and it was 3 a.m. before that, just simply to feed the baby. I now do have a longer rhythm, but that's simply because I'm feeding the baby, burping, and doing all that cool stuff, right? And so that means that, yes, okay, mine is longer, but I've had to adapt it for the situation. It still has the same effect. And ultimately, before that, it was probably maximum half an hour, if that, right? And still set me up to energize me, and give me focus, more focus than I've ever had before, being very, very honest with you, more mental capacity, so I can actually deal with life outside of being in work mode. And now being in dad mode, I feel like I am present. I get it wrong, but I am present most of the time. Of course, he's 3.5 months old, so he's only just starting to kind of want some attention. But yeah, first of all, in system stack, set up those morning and evening rhythms. Number two is I implemented focus sprints when working. So again, part of this environment thing, setting up that focus space, and then implementing the deep work patterns, the focus sprints. And that really helped me as well to know when I'm focusing in and know when I'm not, right? That's huge. Because again, when we're just saying, right, I'm working 9 to 5, and I need, you can do this, by the way, if you've got a job or if you've got a business, but I'm working to 9 to 5 and you expect to be focused that whole entire time, like, it's not going to happen. Like, people like composers and stuff like that, they train themselves to be focused for like 5 hours a day, and that's pretty hardcore. So again, it's understanding when the focus points are during the day, and creating those focus sprints. So number 3 is I created the peak performance planning system, which is basically a weekly planning loop, and it helps me to get into peak performance, because ultimately these weekly planning loops are going to help me to have my organization, which allows me to stop thoughts of what I've got to do at work going round and round in my head, and it's implementing the organization and the structures and systems in that weekly planning loop as well. So again, it's not just about the to-do list, it's about how can I peak perform every single day. What am I doing to do that, and how can I have that as a weekly planning loop. And number 4, most importantly, I started doing intentional and spontaneous recovery windows. So a recovery loop is something where effectively you recover, you're feeling like energy slipping, so you recover, which then brings you back into high energy, right? And it's this loop of constantly going after that. Now, one thing, and I think for the high performing dads that I've helped and in my own self, it's been one of the hardest things to do. Why? Because there's a lot of guilt around taking time out or taking time to rest, because there's a million other things to do in life, right? And I did this with one of the high performing dads. He was always wired, or tired, or both. He was pushing through, stressed, owns a business, has 3 kids, and ultimately was on the floor, if I'm being honest, genuinely rock bottom. And we changed it around because one of the huge things that we implemented was these recovery loops, and understanding that when we operate from a place of rest and recovery, the quality of work's better, the focus we have at work's better. So, we grow business, we grow at work, but then we still have some left over for family, for kids, for wife. And we can leave work at work, right? And we can set up our days rather than being like, I've got to endlessly work and work and work. Most days I do all my work pretty much in 4 to 5 hours, absolute maximum now. And I get a lot done. And that's because of these recovery loops. And I know that if I take a step back to recover and rest when I need to, I'll end up having far more energy the next day and I can carry on. Whereas if I just keep trying to push through because of the guilt, because of the, I shouldn't be resting, I should be doing this, that, and the other, I will 100% be far, far worse off, right? Because I've been there, as I was saying earlier. And so is this other high performing dad I was just on about. And so now he was even just saying yesterday, I'm going to take time to rest, even though the kids are off next week for Easter, even though I've got a ton of work to do that I've not been able to do in the last few weeks because of XYZ. I can't go into it for privacy reasons. But he's then got this ton of pressure at work, ton of pressure because kids are going to be off and he can't do the work then. But he still realized that if he doesn't take time out now, the next few days he's going to get even worse and worse and worse. The quality of work is going to go down. He's not going to do what he wants for his clients. And, the clients are probably, they'll be all right with the work, but they might not come back or, whatever. There's a ton of repercussions. But he takes a step back. He should be thriving today because he's done it in the right way. So there's intentional recovery loops, which are planned in, and the spontaneous, which just happen if your energy tanks. And so that means more recovery, which equals higher energy, which equals a better me or a better person, right? And so lastly, the bonus, like I said, this one's going to be good. Don't forget, I've got something free for you after this, which will give you way more information on this in a bespoke manner as well. So the bonus of this is the operator upgrade. Now, for me, this was the biggest thing. And for definitely the high performing dads, this has been the biggest thing for them. So I realized that I couldn't have the same identity as the default dad mode that I had and that I was in. The identity that I had was of that person. So upgrading business to be a different person in my relationships, in my being a father. I couldn't just continue to be the same man because it wasn't working, right? As I told you earlier. And so this is one of the biggest mistakes I see guys making and not doing is upgrading the operator, which is you, right? And thinking about being intentional about, jumping into the high performing dad identity, right? But being intentional about the man who that is. And it's the man who naturally protects his time, naturally protects his energy, and naturally protects his presence. He knows his highest priorities. He has eliminated distractions. He goes on straight line momentum, so that's not diverging. He's not constantly weaving in and out or going around in circles or zigzagging everywhere. He's just going down the straight line towards his goals. And that he knows his highest priorities and he lives those out every single day because he knows he's happier, he knows he's more fulfilled, and knows he's more purposeful. And ultimately, all of this gives back time because less distractions equals less time doing things that we're not really wanting to do anyway. Imagine if you just, this might not resonate with everyone, but imagine if you stopped watching TV. Well, that might be 1 or 2 hours back in a day. Imagine if you stopped or deleted social medias like Instagram, Facebook, whatever. You don't have to. I'm just saying, how much time would you get back? Even if it's half an hour, that's how much? Half an hour every single day. That's 3.5 hours a week, right? And I'm not saying that you need to do these things, by the way. I'm just giving you an example of what you can do. So when you upgrade to the high performing dad identity, you have to, of course, figure that out, but live that now. You're going to get it wrong. For me, it took a lot of reps. It took a lot of reflection. And it took a lot of adjustments. And that's what happens over time. And that's the point in the system stack, to automate discipline, the control room. So you're literally making it easy for yourself to become focused, and the attention audit. So you're actually figuring out, well, yes, this is the man I want to be, but the attention audit, right? Well, where is my energy currently going and where should it be going? And so they're the 4 things, right? And genuinely, that last one, if you did that, that'll change the game for you, because we have to be stepping into something intentional, something different as an identity, because if we're not, we're just always stepping into the same person. We can't just willpower or change our way through it, right? We can't just force ourselves to change. There has to be something else we're going and stepping into and living into. If you didn't set goals or targets in business, like how would you, or work, how would you know where you're going? Or how would you have anything to go for, right? It would just be like stepping into your car and just starting to drive, and you wanted to actually get somewhere. You had a destination in mind, but you've ended up the complete opposite end of the country because you weren't intentional. You didn't set the destination and figure out the route to get there, or just use Google Maps nowadays. So, as I said, there's a free thing to this. If you watch this far, you get this. I'm only looking to have 5 conversations, but I will personally go into this in a bit more depth with you, the dopamine reset system. I'll also personally give you my presence protocol, which effectively is the transition from work mode to dad mode, right? Because being honest, that's one of the hardest things for most dads, is switching, okay? Having that work mode into dad mode and not blending the two, right? And so I'll give you the presence protocol and how to do that as well. And I'll take you through this, and we could even just focus on one of those points that I've talked about in a little bit more depth. And just in return, the reason why this is free is because in return, I'm doing a bit of research for this evolution of the high performing dad and the dopamine reset system. And so I just want you to answer 3 questions, really as simple as that. And then I will give you this back for free. It's a bit of a value trade. So if you'd like that, if you're interested, just drop a comment saying trade, and I'll send out the details and how to get that. And I appreciate you watching if you have watched this far. And yeah, let's go after it. Let's eliminate those distractions so we can upgrade our operator and become the high performing dad.